better. Hi, everyone. My name is Yulia. I'm a registered migration agent located on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. And today I would like to discuss skilled visas, specifically point-tested skilled visas, subclass 189, 190, 491, and obviously transition to PR from 491 to 191. So let's begin with a little bit of background, what's going to be happening. So this session is going to be recorded, and I'm happy to answer your questions at the end of the session. At the moment, I will be briefly discussing what sort of visas are skilled visas, who is eligible, how to boost points, and what to do while you're waiting for the invitation. So let's begin. Skilled visas are, I would say, the most wanted visas, specifically for candidates from offshore. The reason for that is these visas are currently does not require to have an employer, and you need to go through the process. However, straight away, I would like to tell you the structure of the applications. So skilled visas, point tested, are based on invitation. So you cannot apply for those visas until you get an invitation. The invitation process is driven by state sponsorship, state and territories need, or government needs and country needs as such. So therefore, nobody will be able to predict when you specifically, or your case, will get this precious invitation. So for skilled visas, we have specific list of occupations available for each and every specific visa. And if you're going to be looking at the broader options for state and territories, there will be each and individual state and territory list of occupations with their own specific criteria. So when you're going to be starting the process, first key elements to consider is the applicant's age, because that's absolutely crucial and important. The skilled visas are for applicants who are under 45. So if you are over 45, there is no options for you to apply for skilled visas. If you are under 45, then you need to look at whether your occupation is on the list, and then whether you will be able to satisfy requirements to get skill assessment. So the list of occupations are available on the government website. And once you look at that, you need to go through the Skill Assessment Authority webpage to double check what sort of criteria you need to meet. So from time to time, not all the time, skill assessment may require you to get English test done at this point. However, it's not the case for IT occupations. It's not the case for VET-assess occupations. And it's not the case for TRA applications. In this case, if the English is a requirement for skill assessment, first of all, you need to go and get this done. If English is not a requirement for skill assessment, I would strongly recommend to still consider English as a first priority before you start working with documents. My practical experience with clients shows that it's a lot to take if you're starting working with the document, starting your English test preparation, and majority of you will be still working and having a family and other affairs. So it's simply not enough time. Strategically, I would recommend to start with English test. If we're talking about the current requirements, absolute minimum requirements is competent English, which is IELTS 6 in each band or PTE 50 each band, or eligible passport from the English-speaking countries. However, absolute minimum may not be sufficient to secure your invitation. So in order to see what's going on, first you need to look at the statistics, whether your occupation is in high demand and priority. Currently, we have trades occupation are in demand, and hence the applications and invitations are issued on the minimum points. Then, if your occupation is not in such priority or demand, then you need to consider higher English results in order to be competitive in terms of points and in order to be attractive for states and territory government. Because current year shows us that the government will be looking at highest English for primary applicant and at least competent English for secondary adults who will be joining the primary applicant. So it is in your best interest to start with English. And as I said, top results will bring you superior English, which is going to be IELTS all 8. I would not recommend taking IELTS to achieve superior language, simply because it's too much effort, and the statistic shows that not many people really achieve IELTS in superior level. So I would recommend to look at PTE, Pearson English Test, where you will have to achieve all 79 score. In this case, if you're planning ahead, and for example, if you are already achieving proficient level, it's either IELTS 7 in each band or PTE 65, but you're willing to work harder to the highest level, at this point, you may consider starting your work on your documents and paperwork, and then simultaneously still consider advancing your English in order to achieve superior language. In terms of the process, so we have English test. I would recommend for primary and secondary applicant to consider studying and taking English test pretty much simultaneously. Then we're talking about skill assessment, at least for primary applicant. Then you will still need to have a look whether the secondary applicant can fit into any UNSCO category. If that's possible, it could be beneficial for both primary and secondary applicant to take skill assessment in order to have more chances and more points. Plus, if there will be different occupations, then you can have multiple expression of interest in order to increase your chances. So once you've done English and skill assessment, the next step would be to apply for expression of interest. While you're overseas, expression of interest can be lodged for each and every state and territory where you have your occupation available and where you can satisfy the requirements. Please bear in mind that a lot of states and territories currently looking at the applicants who are still working in the nominated occupation while overseas. So if you're planning ahead your process, please do not quit your job, at least until the moment once you lodge your visa. So once your expression of interest are lodged and your points are carefully claimed, bear in mind that if you overclaim the points and the points cannot be proved by documents, unfortunately, you will have a rejection on the visa. So expression of interest, it's an application with no government fee. However, it's, I would say, the most important application out of the whole steps in the process. So you need to make sure you claim absolutely everything carefully and correctly. Once you lodge your expression of interest, the timing when exactly you will get your invitation is unknown. Nobody will be able to predict that. Based on the previous years, I would say year 2023 was more or less stable. However, last financial year was absolutely out of the picture, and a lot of people did not receive no invitation and was just standing in the queue waiting for the results. So this year we only started because our program year starts 1st of July. Every 1st of July, we have all the states to get their places, and they then reconsider their requirements to invite candidates, and then the process starts. For each state and territory, there will be their own processes, and nobody can predict when exactly the invitation round will happen. Some states may publish the results of each invitation round, some don't. And unfortunately, that's how the process goes. So you will be in the darkness until you get an invitation for the state to apply. So that's why it's really beneficial to get your expression of interest while you're overseas for several states and territories in order to increase your options, increase your chances. So once you're going to be looking what sort of visa type to apply, so we have three types of visa. 189, which is permanent residency, and the permanent residency does not attach to any location. Once you get 189 visa, you're free to come to Australia and live in any location. You don't have to work in Australia. You can come to Australia and work for overseas if you would like so. And then after 4 years of residing in Australia on permanent residency visa, you will be eligible for citizenship if all the other criteria are satisfied. So this is the most wanted, I would say, visa out of all. However, the process of selection is based heavily on the government demands. So just lately, we've seen a lot of occupations heavily in medical field or in teaching who kept getting the invitations under 189. This year, trade occupations that are included in the list for 189 visa are getting prioritized. So for those of you who are watching me and you have your trades qualification and work experience, that's time for you to consider moving to Australia if you would like so, because that's a good climate for these occupations. Any other occupation that's currently on the list has pretty much higher competition in terms of points. Whoever would like to secure 189 visa, and hence, again, relying fully and blindly only for 189 expression of interest is a high risk to get potentially nothing. So the next type of visa, which is pretty much equal to 189 visa, is 190 visa. So the same permanent residency, but with the attachment to particular state and territory where you're getting your invitation. So in terms of further steps, the attachment will be to that state and territory that gives you invitation, but it's not going to be reflected on your visa. Be careful on the fact that well, you're going to be applying for state and territory. You're going to be accepting the invitation in the form of declaration, and you're going to be declaring that you have genuine intention to come and reside in this particular state and territory. So a lot of people, without seeing any restriction on 190 visa, consider that it is possible to just go and live in any state and territory. However, this state and territory who provided you with invitation will require you to register your application upon arrival, and the state and territory have all rights to monitor your presence in the state and territory. However, again, there is no direct and straight answer whether the department will be heavily monitoring people who are not going to be compliant and will not be coming to particular state and territory to live after the visa is granted. But I would consider this move very carefully, because even permanent residency visa can be potentially cancelled under certain circumstances. And if you're not going to be following your own promises, it may later on backfire you on the citizenship application potentially. We didn't see any heavy implications, but this is a warning because the Department of Home Affairs is taking each and every word and whatever you're claiming seriously. So if you have an intention, if you're claiming your intention to come to a certain state to reside after 190 is granted, and say after 190 is not is granted and you're not coming at all to this stage, state, is going to be a serious concern. So be careful on that particular stage. And apart from this commitment, I cannot see any big distinguish point between 189 and 190, because still once you get your 190 visa, you don't have to work in Australia. You have to come to Australia and live in that state that gave you invitation. However, there is no requirement to work specifically in Australia, so you can work for overseas as well. In terms of number 3 visa that can be considered for skilled migrants, it's 491 visa. It's provisional visa, so it's not temporary visa right away. However, what provisional means, that's the visa that will allow you to transit to permanent residency once every criteria is satisfied. So 491 visa is provisional visa up to 5 years duration, where you will have to satisfy the requirements to come and live in Australia and work and live from regional Australia for 3 years until you can lodge your application for permanent residency. And this is a distinguished point, because when you're comparing 189 and 190 visa, you will have the whole 5 years of your travel facility, which will be attached on permanent visa, that will allow you to come to Australia and live in Australia permanently. And at this point, there is no rush for you to relocate, say, once the visa is granted. So you can take the whole 5 years to consider your relocation, do it slowly, finish your affairs in your home country, etc. In comparison, 491 visa is 5-year visa where there is no option to extend this visa. And that's the catch. It basically forces you to relocate to Australia as soon as practically possible in order to start clocking your 3 years. And then you will have to find a job in regional Australia, or you can live in regional Australia but work remotely for big cities without going to the office in the big cities. And that's important, because on a provisional visa, there will be certain compulsory criteria for you to report changing of your address, and for the department to monitor where you live, where you study, whether you're compliant with your conditions on your visa. And that's a big consideration, because you need to make sure you're coming in the regional area. You need to make sure you live and study and work in regional areas. And you need to start preparing to transit to permanent residency once you satisfy all the criteria. And what's another big distinguished point within these 3 visas? So in terms of points allocation for the visa itself, 189 visa, independent skilled visa, will not give you any additional points. For 190, just for the fact that you're picking that type of visa, you can get additional 5 points. And for 491 visa, you can get additional 15 points, just again for the fact because you're picking that type of visa. You need to be mindful what sort of visa you may be choosing. And I had the clients who were insisting on permanent residency visa only, and they didn't even consider 491 visa. Time was ticking. They may change the age category, and things may not work out. So my advice would be to consider all those categories, because for all those categories, if you're coming by yourself or with the family, for all these three visas, you will have access to Medicare, which is absolute bonus. Even on provisional visa, you will have access to free schooling in the government schools for children. So that's also a bonus. There are limitations for 491 visa where you will have to pay for childcare fully. And obviously, it's harder to secure any mortgage or any loan when you are on temporary visa. Plus, my advice would be to heavily research on the regional areas, what areas will suit particularly your needs, your occupation, your career, your family lifestyle, and your family situation, in order to prepare for your big move. Once you are in the process, and once you get your invitation to apply for the state, you will have to provide certain documents to the state and pay the state or territory fee. Depends on the state. It may be zero, it may be up to $700. Once the state approves you, then you will get the invitation to apply for a visa, or you will get an invitation for 189 to apply for the visa. So this has a very limited time, 60 days, to apply for the visa. So this time cannot be extended. If you miss it, that's it. You start all over again. In terms of processing time for the visas, depends on the occupation, whether it's on demand or not. The processing time may vary from 6 months to year and a half. And once you're in the process, the good practice would be to consider researching for your next steps after the visa is granted, specifically for those who applied for 491 visa, in order not to waste time once you get the visa, and relocate as quickly as possible. If we're talking about career changes or career moves, none of these visas will force you to work in the occupations which you declare, in which you apply under. So once you have these visas, you can change your career fully and work as in any occupation as you like. So in terms of point test system, as I said, I'm stressing that the process is unknown, and currently the states and territories got their allocation. The process of selecting candidates already started. A few states already done their rounds of invitations. Please bear in mind that we don't know the exact statistics, what's going to happen this year. But last year it was absolute nightmare, because a lot of people simply didn't get any invitations. And for those of you who are considering what's next, if you didn't get an invitation last year, there pretty much in a nutshell can be two options. Option number one is start searching for employment and secure employment for 482 visa, employed sponsored visa, in order to come to Australia and work in Australia, and then consider skilled visas from Australia. Alternatively, there are employed sponsored visas in regional areas, or if none of this works for you and you're still young enough, I would say, you may consider continue your study in Australia, again, in order to come to Australia fast enough. But in this case, you need to be mindful whether skilled migration will be possible straight away from student visa, or you will have to be on any other visa, for example, graduate visa or employed sponsored visa, in order to apply for state territory nomination. How it works: whilst you are overseas, you can apply for as many states as you like. And as I said, it's worth considering all potential states and all visa types you can apply for, and simply wait, because there is nothing you can do about the selection process. If you're coming in Australia, you need to be mindful that while you're in Australia, you usually apply for in this particular state where you are residing. For example, you come in as a student, there may be limitation from the state to prevent you to apply from student visa. Or if you're coming as employed sponsored migrant on, say, 482 visa, then again, you need to have a look at the particular state, whether there is your occupation available and whether skilled migration is possible at all in that state where you're going to reside. So that's important as your strategic planning. So for those of you who are from overseas, there's not much you can do about your points. And currently, we see the basically direction from all the states where they're going to be focusing not only for the highest point candidates, but they're going to be focusing on a variety of factors: age, English level of the candidate, and work experience. So it's going to be a multi-factor assessment. So again, there is no certainty of whether specific occupation, specific points will guarantee you permanent residency. However, the states and territories are focusing on really skilled candidates, not people who are just finished. However, it still depends on the occupation. If you are overseas, your best points to achieve will be PT superior for primary applicant. For secondary applicant, at the very least, PT competent, and still you can consider skill assessment for secondary applicant if possible to basically prepare your case. If you are planning to come to Australia on student visa, or if you're already in Australia on student visa, then you will have potentially an additional points for your study in Australia if you satisfy all criteria. If you are studying and living in regional areas, it's going to be extra points. Also, you can polish your English language, and at the same time, you can look at an opportunity to search for work in order to secure at least 1 year of work experience at a skilled level in order to get additional points for your collection. So being onshore may bring you an opportunity to find an employer, potentially for sponsorship, or bring you an opportunity to boost points through studying in Australia, as an example. Again, let's run through the process one more time. So how it works in terms of processing this visa. And then I will be able to have a look at the questions I already have, and I will be able to direct you to any questions you may have. You can put the questions in the chat and I will be able to answer you on the spot. So 189, 190, 491 visas. There are point tested skilled visas, and these visas can only be applied after the invitation is granted. So you cannot directly apply on these visas. The other interesting thing to consider is when your points are locked and whether you get bridging visas. So the points are locked at time of invitations. And it's important to consider when you're going to be applying, especially when you are reaching your age milestone. And then you're rushing to apply for expression of interest, say in a month's time before you reach your other milestone, thinking that the points will be locked. That's not correct. So the points will be locked only once you get an invitation. The same happened with work experience and any other factors. Once you get an invitation from the state, depending on the state, they will give you around 14 days to upload more documents. And then after these 14 days, the state will process your application. And if everything is there, state will allow your application to be approved and you will get invitation to apply for the visa. Please remember that, again, the final decision on your points and overall visa application is in the hands of Department of Home Affairs. That fact that you got your skill assessment and, for example, go through the state and then apply for the visa, if you got through a few steps before you apply for the visa, there is still no guarantee that the visa will be granted. The common mistakes I've seen throughout my practice is where the applicants did not claim the points correctly. So, especially for work experience points. So, if you're working overseas for overseas company, you can claim your overseas employment if it was assessed by the skill assessment authority. That's the best way to go with it, to have more secure outcome, and if this work experience is skilled. Then it heavily depends what assessing authority you're going through. And also bear in mind, whatever work experience you are claiming, you need to be prepared to show sufficient and enough evidence of your work experience, paid work experience. Here, the absolute minimum will be your reference letter, where you will indicate all your required information, job title, dates, specifically in date, months, and year format, and your workload for a week, your salary, your location, and your duties and responsibilities. Everything needs to be done on the company letterhead, and the company letterhead must match the evidence of your paid employment. So registration of the company must match the taxation and superannuation records. If for any chance you don't have enough documents to cover specific work experience, you need to be careful and double check whether you actually can claim this work experience, because it's very brutal if you claim your work experience in the vision that it's going to be accepted, knowing that, for example, for that very period you work cash in hand, and then department will ask you the evidence and you can't provide nothing, and department will refuse your visa. That's going to be very harsh. However, that's how the legislation works. So if, for example, you work absolute cash in hand, and if you don't have any evidence of official work experience, my advice would be not to claim that work experience at all. Again, for some majority, I would say, occupations, you cannot claim your work experience while studying in terms of for the purpose of points. So also be careful on that. If you are in Australia and working for overseas, do not claim this period of work experience, because that's not going to be accepted. So it's either you are sitting overseas, working overseas, or you are working in Australia and you are in Australia. So there are two categories. If, for example, you are sitting in Australia but working for overseas, you can still use that period for your skill assessment. But for points, you will not be able to claim those points for the purpose of point collection. So that's very important. I have another interesting question pretty much all the time, especially in the eyes where currently there are a lot of competition for points, and some families have only one primary applicant who has high English qualification, and the secondary applicant has absolutely nothing. Hence, the points will be decreased. And a lot of people are asking whether we can claim that we are not together just in order to get extra points, and then primary applicant will come to Australia and then remarry, or get back together with the secondary applicant who was at the time excluded. My answer to that: don't do it. Reason for that is, unless you are really permanently separated and have no intention to get back together, this kind of scenario will not work, because it's going to be abuse of the system and you pretty much going to be providing false information. But when you're going to get your permanent residency, and if at that point you decide to get back together with that partner who was abolished at the time of your point tested visa, and then you may claim, okay, we've been together for so many years. Be careful, because the department will be reconciling everything, and you may not only get the partner visa rejection, but you can also potentially lose your permanent residency visa. So that is absolutely and very, very important to plan your case ahead and provide correct claims and correct information. So I have a few questions that was submitted prior to this live. So let me get back to them, and I will provide some run through. I'm 42, and the maximum points I can have is 90. So what is the chances to get an invitation, and what's the average sufficient points to secure the invitation from the state? Do you have any real case scenarios for this with this type of score? So unfortunately, you didn't provide any evidence of your occupation and what's the breakdown of the points. Assuming if you're 42, then the points you will get is from highest English and highest work experience. You may still have a chance, but it depends on the occupation. For 90 points, I'm assuming again that you might claim everything and 491 visa. So in this case, it heavily depends on the occupation, but I would use every state and every opportunity to apply. You're still 42, so you have some time left, but I would still consider any other options like employed sponsored visa, or if you have a partner who may be younger than you, then you can consider the partner to be a primary applicant. So nobody can guarantee or guess when exactly the invitation happens, but 90 points, it's a pretty good score, I would say, but depends again on the occupation. Right. Another question is about confirmation of work experience. So some countries doesn't have any taxation system like Dubai or Singapore, and employer and employee doesn't pay no taxes, no super. So what sort of evidence can we have to prove work experience? So in this case, of course, it's not your problem that those countries doesn't have taxation and superannuation. You will still get your pay slips and you will still have your salary one way or another. I would say if this salary can be proven by bank statement that you consistently get your salary through the bank, then you will have a bank statement and your pay slips and your reference letter, which should be, of course, sufficient. So you need to make sure that you have those evidence, because if, for example, you are getting, as I mentioned, your salary through cash payments, then that's not an option to prove anything. Without English, without any test, is it possible to migrate to Australia? Potentially, yes, through partner visa program or asylum programs, but not through skilled visa programs. So for skilled visa, everybody pretty much needs to have high English and skills that are in need in Australia. So the question is about the commitment to live in a state that nominates me for 190 visa. So as I mentioned before, that is not reflected on your visa grant, but I would be careful with that, because simply you made the promise at the state nomination stage where you accepted the nomination and you promised the state to have a commitment to live in come and live in the state for at least 2 years after your 190 was granted. So I would not break those commitments if I can. You are correct. There is no black and white in the legislation, and it may be it may affect all the requirements at the citizenship stage, simply because for the citizenship you will have to declare your residential addresses for the last 5 years. And if you're coming on 190 visa and basically spending your time and then considering applying for citizenship right after you satisfy the criteria, it will be your first 4 years, where your first 2 years you're supposed to be living in a state which offered you nomination. And that, I would say, that may be more of a character issue rather than anything that you are breaking your visa conditions, something like that, because whatever you promise you didn't deliver. And then potentially a department may consider cancellation of 190 visa, but I didn't see this happen at all, because department is simply busy. But we've heard about one case where the applicant got, say, the nomination from Victoria State, and then the applicant was entering Queensland on the first entry on 190 visa, and he was questioned on the borders, where he claimed and confirmed that he had no absolute intention to reside in Victoria, and he always and only wanted to reside in Queensland. And rumors were saying that person was the person's visa was cancelled. Just bear that in mind. If that happen, you can still try to reverse the cancellations through AET tribunal. However, it all costs money, nerves, and obviously time. So again, if you want to be obedient and good citizen in Australia, I would not cheat the system, and I would not change the state if I can, at least for the first 2 years, to be absolutely compliant. If we're talking about expression of interest and registration of interest for 189 and 190 visa, what is the government fee and when you have to pay? At the lodgement of expression of interest, or when the nomination and invitation is received? So expression of interest is absolutely free. Registration of interest in the majority of states is free. And then once you will be invited by the state to lodge the application, then you will have to pay state nomination fee. Can be nothing, can be up to $700 per state. And once you go through the state, then you receive an invitation to apply for a visa, where you will have to apply for the visa and pay for government fees. So nobody will going to process your visa without payment. So payment goes first together with the application for the visa once the invitation is secured, and then the consideration process will start. I lodged my expression of interest for 491 and I'm working on 190. WA says that you're likely to be invited for 491 first due to higher points, but I'm desperately aiming for 190 because of its lower residency requirement. With 85 points for 190 or 95 points for 491 in the priority occupation, should I focus on 491 instead? Someone with 100 points was invited last round. What are my chances? So it really depends on what category you applying under, whether you are a graduate currently residing in WA, whether you are pretty much overseas, or you are on any other temporary visa in WA, or you are residing interstate in Australia. So WA has the specifics who is going to be prioritized. Then they have limited, obviously, places. So it's nobody can really predict. And if you are considering both of these visas, I would not be too fussy and take either of them, because none of them requires you to be employed in a nominated occupation once the visa is granted. And pretty much, if we're talking about pathway from either 190 or 491 to citizenship, then likely and roughly, if you're coming from overseas on 190, you will have to wait for 4 years. And for 491, you'll come from overseas, you have to wait for 3 years to apply to permanent residency, and then to have another year on permanent residency. So we're talking about maybe 5.5 years to the point that you will lodge citizenship application. So the distinguished point between those two visas are only 1.5 years until citizenship. And I would not be too fussy about these options and just take either, because the current climate shows that pretty much the competition are getting higher and higher, and the government approach is shifting from point-tested visas slowly to employer-sponsored visas. And some occupations are very hard to impossible to get employer-sponsored visas, specifically from overseas. So if you're sitting overseas, I would strongly recommend to get at least 491. It's going to make your life way easier than to wait only for 190. I would not do that, and I would secure absolutely every option. And it depends on the state priorities. It depends on how many people are within the same occupation in the state. So state is going to be looking at all the factors. So it's very hard, and do not compare your case to somebody else's, because you just only get the frustration, and you're going to be waiting anxiously, and stress level will be high. So if, again, depends where you are, just plan ahead and just wait for the results, because this process of getting skilled visas are not predictable. And within the last 2 years, the wind really changed, because 2 years ago we were securing easily 491 visas on 65 points, including 15 points for state sponsorship. Now it's not the case anymore, and a lot of people are going to be struggling in terms of higher English and pretty much inability to get this superior English from overseas. So I would use any opportunity. I would be absolutely grateful if 491 happened to any case, I would say. So I'm happy to take any more questions, guys. If you like, just type in the chat. I will wait for a few more minutes. And while I'm waiting, the word of wisdom. So do not get too anxious, because I'm observing a lot of people really get stressed out. It's a process, and this is not a quick process, unfortunately. And you need to have a lot of durability and pretty much calm within this process. So once you're going through the steps, do not take your life away. Pretty much just focus on what you have, get through the process, lodge the application, and then consider any other options while you're waiting, or start researching more about Australia and living in Australia. Don't just sit and click on your visa status every day, because that's what people do, and that sometimes works against the application. And another tip from myself as a registered migration agent: once you lodge the application, bear in mind that police clearances are expired a year after the issue date. So just set yourselves for renewal of police clearances without waiting for the department to contact you, to make potentially this process smoother and quicker. Sometimes when people are waiting for that long, and we upload new police clearances. It sometimes works and applications just get picked up and the officer look at it. If no questions asked, then the processing will come quicker. However, please bear in mind that, as I said, for every single claim you do, you need to provide documents. And once you provide all the documents, if nothing is there, it's likely the process will take quicker, because the application will be decision ready. So set yourself for success. I wish each and every of you to achieve your best results. And if you are a migrant who are coming in Australia, even on skilled visa, we just started our new project called shorter.au. So shorter skills will be dedicated to help skilled migrants to find jobs, skilled jobs in Australia, or find, again, skilled jobs for sponsorship. So jump on our page. Pre-registration is free. And you can always be first in line once we officially launch the system, to be able to showcase your resume and your profile for potential employment in Australia. Thank you very much.